Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Pation Accord studio. Welcome to the show. So on today's episode, it's near and dear to my heart because on this episode, well, I decided to start just looking at some old school cards, some from my childhood. I started playing right around the time Odyssey was, so like 2001-ish, and I stopped sometime in high school or before high school around then, essentially. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to take a look at the cards that I used to play with back then and talk about some hidden gems that are still fantastic today in Commander and ones that players are still sleeping on. So with all that said, let's jump into it. And I probably should mention a few things. Number one, if you're interested in these cards, make sure you check out that card list link in the description below. I try to keep everything pretty budget friendly. I think the highest costed cards like around $3 or so, but most of these cards are less than $1. That being said, let's jump into it with different categories. First, starting off with creatures. And one that is fantastic that still, I mean, I brought this up on multiple episodes throughout the years. Dimir Houseguard is an incredible card, and it is still slept on. A 2/3 skeleton for 4 mana with fear. Sacrifice a creature, regenerate it. Transmute for 1 black. Now, again, with this kind of, I guess, old school retro card version of this, it doesn't show off, what the actual text of Transmute is. Basically, pay that cost, discard the card, search your library for any card that's got a converted mana cost equal to this card's converted mana cost, so 4, put in your hand. This card is insane because, well, it is a free sacrifice outlet that protects itself, so already great with aristocrat-style strategies, but also just, hey, are you in a deck that has a need for a tutor to get maybe something specific? Sure, but like at 4 mana is, I mean, look through your decks, a very common mana value among some pretty important cards for most decks out there. And if you've got a deck that revolves around maybe a couple of cards, and some of those are at 4, this is absolutely incredible. And the thing about this compared to like other tutors as well is that this is an ability. So unless the opponent has a stifle effect, which the vast majority of players do not use stifle effects, this is a tutor that is basically uncounterable. So yes, there's a lot in this little package right here. Just 7 cents for this. Again, a free sacrifice outlet that protects itself, and then one that also can just be an incredible tutor that is basically uncounterable. A great card. Next up, Glory. I used to think this was one of the coolest cards when I was a kid. A 3/3, and apologies, there's probably some, I mean, this is, and maybe it's still just an incarnation, but there's probably some, like, erratas to, like, maybe creature types and whatnot. Incarnation, if maybe that still is the case, let me know in the comments below. A flyer for 5 mana in total. Pay 2 and a white, choose a color. Creatures you control gain protection with the chosen color until end of turn. Activate only if Glory is in your graveyard. This is one of the rare cards that's like, hey, graveyard ability. With this in your graveyard, that is an insanely valuable ability. Being able to just, oh yeah, you're casting a red damage-based board wipe. Yeah, I'll pay 3 mana. My creatures gain protection from your Blasphemous Act, and they survive that. Oh, you only have green creatures to block? Well, I want to swing through at you, so I'm going to get my creatures protection from green and swing your way. Or if you're swinging at me with your zombie army, cool, protection from black. This is an absurdly amazing repeatable effect, and again, unless an opponent has graveyard hate, they're not going to be able to take this away from you. This is just basically like an enchantment or artifact, like repeating effect on the board that you can pay for that they cannot interact with, again, unless they get rid of your graveyard. So, yeah, it's just a very good card. I mean, here's the thing. Yes, okay, you do need to get this in your graveyard to actually make that work. But that being said, let's say you're in red. Yeah, you've got plenty of, looting and rummaging effects. Let's say you're in blue, plenty of rummaging effects looting effects as well, typically. Drawing and discarding. And on top of that, I mean, hey, it just, if you're utilizing it as a creature, you can block with it to get it in your graveyard as well. There's different ways to do that, of course, or like self-mill. There's plenty of ways to get it in your graveyard. If you've got a deck that can reliably get it in your graveyard, it is a really cool, really powerful effect that, yeah, your opponent might have to just dedicate a full resource to try to get rid of your graveyard because of this, even if your graveyard isn't that a big part of your deck, essentially, except outside of this. So it's a really cool effect. Next up, Netherborn F. I promise every single one of these cards does not transmute, but Transmute's amazing. A 2/4 that costs 6 mana, enters the battlefield. Each opponent loses 1 life for each creature they control, and again, Transmute for 3 mana. Now, when it comes to Transmute, it might be slightly less relevant than the 4 mana value Dimir Houseguard. That being said, still very, 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 very good. Again, there are certain decks out there that revolve around certain cards. If you got a deck that revolves around something at 6 mana, cool. Utilize something like this, like my Song of the World Soul deck. I love that card. And it's like, oh yeah, this goes and gets me that. It's also a really cool finisher for you too, potentially, because yeah, that's a pretty powerful effect. ETB, each opponent loses 1 life for each creature they control. Again, this punishes those go wide strategies, which are very, very popular. Someone has, 20 tokens on the board. They're like, I'm going to win. I've got my army. And you're like, no, you lose 20 life for me just playing this card, which I sometimes use a tutor instead. Also, in a blink strategy, this can be very effective as well, of course, or a clone strategy, so make sure you're keeping that in mind too. Next up, Kamal, Fist of Kosa. A 4/3 human druid for 6 mana. Pay a green, target land becomes a 1/1 creature till turn till I land. Pay 2 green, creature score +3/+3 gain triple till turn. Basically, a repeatable overrun effect, essentially the exact same cost as overrun. Just keep doing that again and again and again to pump your army. You can of course make your own army with lands if you really want to do that. But I wouldn't say hidden, but a part of this card that is sometimes overlooked is its defensive value. I mean, yes, okay, like if someone's casting a board wipe and it's like a red damage-based board wipe, they're like, 4 damage each creature, and you're like, haha, I saved my team, +3/+3, yay! Sure, but more than likely, the way that you can save your team is actually, hey, I see that you're about to cast a Wrath of God. Yes, I am. I'm gonna stop you because you've got a big army over there. Okay, well, if you're going to do that, I'm just going to let you know this. I've got 6 forests untapped. You've got 8 lands. If you cast that Wrath of God, and this is on you, I'm going to turn your lands into creatures, and they will be destroyed. Oh, okay. I guess I won't cast my Wrath. Or they do, and then they're out of the game anyway. So, yeah, is that kind of a potentially frowned upon strategy? I'd say it's a gray area. Had this discussion before with like natural affinity and those kinds of things that turn all lands into creatures. This is, in my opinion, a fair play. This is one that you probably need to talk to your playgroup ahead of time, though. But it is, in my opinion, a fair play because, hey, my defense is on the board right here, all right? If you cast that Wrath, I'm turning your lands into creatures. That's on you. You can choose not to cast that Wrath. You can choose to try to get rid of Kamal first before then Wrathing, essentially. This is a way to get around it. So this is a not only offensive card that can just pump your team into oblivion, it can make you an army, but it can also be amazing board wipe protection. So yeah, outside of it being a cool commander, it's a card that can work in the 99 of big mana decks out there because, again, it is a win condition. It's also a Wrath protection condition too. It's a very cool card. Next up, Thermopod. This is one of those cards which I just don't understand. There's like that one like Nicol Bolas, gosh, I can't remember the name of it, but it's like a pyramid that costs like 3. Anyways, there are certain cards out there that have like additional text on them, and because of that additional text, players just like don't use them. So this is Thermopod, a 4/3 slug snow creature that costs 5 mana. This text right here, I think, just throws people off right away, and they're like, well, I'm not going to use it because I'm not using snowlands. Snowland, mana, whatever it's called, Thermopod gains haste off turn. Who cares? That does not matter at all. At all. Ignore that text. Pretend it's not on there. It does not matter. Some people see that and say like, well, if I'm not playing Snowlands and I can't utilize that, does not matter at all. At all. This card is incredible. Sacrifice a creature, add red to your mana pool. Absolutely incredible. This is basically, what, Phyrexian Altar, essentially, but for red? I mean, on a creature, sure, so it's easier to get rid of than just an artifact. But still, it is essentially like a Phyrexian Altar adjacent type card. And again, people, like, don't utilize it, I think, sometimes because it's like, well, I can't get haste out of it. Who cares? It doesn't matter. It is an incredible free sacrifice outlet that gives you an absurd value. Again, absurd mana. Sometimes sacrifice outlets, even though they're just like sacrifice a creature, do nothing, that's fine. That is completely fine for certain decks out there, like Aristocrat style decks out there, like, yeah, you sacrifice a creature, great. This more so is like, no, here's actual value that you can then utilize probably in some pretty broken ways. Here's some mana. Yeah, you can do some crazy things with a card like this. Do not sleep on this one. And again, please, 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 I can't remember, it's like Gate to the Afterlife, whatever the card is that goes and gets God Pharaoh's Gift or whatever, but like, God Pharaoh's Gift, whichever one, it's the one that gets the thing out of the cost 7, and then it creates the 4/4 zombies. It's a smaller version, it's the 3/1 that's like, hey, creature dies, draw a discard, gain a life. Please let me know in the comments below which one I'm talking about, but like, some players, again, if it has extra text on the card that like, you don't care about, just say like, I don't want to use it then. No! Ignore that first part, it's an amazing card. Next up, Whirlpool Warrior, if I could talk. A 2/2 Merfolk 4/2 and a blue. Enters the battlefield. Shuffle the cards to your hand, your library, then draw that many cards. Pay a red. Sacrifice. Each player shuffles cards to their hand, draws that many cards. It's a very interesting wheel because there are very few wheels out there like kind of like repeatable wheels and immediately repeatable wheels. It works differently than a wheel in that it's like not, it depends on the type of wheel, right? Some wheels are like, hey, shuffle your graveyard into your library and your hand in your library and all those things. Other ones like discard the cards and draw that many. This one's like, no, shuffle your hand, draw that many. So it does replace things. It works really well with, of course, things like, Psychosis Crawler. Also incredible with things like Teferi's Ageless Insight, which doubles up your card draw, or other things that care about the amount of cards you've had in a turn. Yes, it's great for that. And also, it's kind of like card protection as well, too, because, like, if, like, let's say you are in blue, obviously you've got bounce effects. So, like, let's say you Aether Gale, right? You bounce the 6 most threatening non-land permanents your opponents have back to their hand. Cool, you did that. Or, I mean, in a bigger version, like Cyclonic Rift, whatever. You can say, yeah, let's make sure you don't have those cards most likely. So you just pay a single mana, sacrifice this, then you make every single player wheel too. So keep that in mind. So it can be offensive, defensive. It's not for every deck out there. It definitely is not. But it's one that can definitely be very effective. And yeah, blink decks can work well too because they keep repeating that effect again and again and again. Next up, I guess a blink deck could utilize this temporarily. Call of the Claw, a 2/2 elf with flash that costs 2 and a green. Enters the battlefield, put a 2/2 green bear creature token in the battlefield for each non-token creature put in a grave from the battlefield this turn. This is a card that can just be a kind of like army replacement for you. Or again, like if you are playing that aristocrat style deck, you know when you want to sacrifice your creatures, so do that all in a single turn. Play this, get a ton of extra creatures, and then do it again. Now, obviously, this does say non-token creature, so keep that in mind. It's not for every deck. Again, if you have like a creature fodder-based strategy that's entirely based on tokens, you're not going to get a lot of value out of that. But again, like this being able to, again, for 3 mana, flash it in, you get an army of 2/2s to replace your army that was just taken out. That can be a game-changing and even game-ending decision. So again, it's kind of like protection. It's kind of like, again, like aristocrat value-generating engine. It's a really, really cool card. And yeah, those are the creatures. Now let's move on to some sorceries, and ironically, I guess I already talked about like Kamal. This is kind of Kamal adjacent, I guess. Life and Death. Life is a sorcery for a single green mana. All lands you control become 1/1 creatures on a turn. They're still lands. So being able to turn all of your lands into creatures, that can be something that can be, well, very effective in certain decks. Again, there's certain decks that are like, hey, untap your creatures like this, like Vitalize type card or Two Arms type card. So yeah, you can really use and abuse those types of effects by getting extra mana out of your lands again and again and again by untapping your creatures, which is easier to do than untapping lands. That being said, it can also help you, with an army of creatures. They're like, okay, I've got a couple anthems in play. I play this. My lands are now 4/4s because I've got some anthems in play. They can be pretty deadly in attacking. It is risky, obviously. Again, turning your lands into creatures it's only until end of turn, so keep that in mind. It's not permanent. It is risky because, yeah, someone could destroy your lands, which is not the best thing. That being said, the vast majority of wraths out there are not instant speed, so please keep that in mind. That being said, if you aren't utilizing that side as much, I mean, Death is an incredible effect as well. Source for 1 and a black, return target creature card from your grave to the battlefield. You lose life equal to its mana value. A very, very, very good, very reasonably costed reanimation style effect. Yeah, you lose equal to its mana value. What is life, right? You're playing Commander, you're still off at 40 life. You're fine. Bring something massive out of your graveyard back into play for just 2 mana again. So this card is flexible. It can work on a couple of different strategies out there. And yeah, it's a pretty cool card. Speaking of cool cards, now, this is one, I mean, it's just a very, very spicy card. Okay, let's say that. I'd say that this is the kind of card that you do need to be a little good at politics to actually make this work very well. There's like a low bar for this card, but there's also a really high ceiling for it too. Sorcery for 3 mana. Reveal cards from your library. An opponent chooses from among them a creature, a land, a non-creature nominated card. Put those cards in your hand, then shuffle. This is, I mean, just at a base level, 3 mana, 3 cards. How many other cards out there can say, hey, you get 3 mana, 3 cards, and it's guaranteed to be one of each different kind of thing? Like, it's, again, 1 creature, 1 non-creature non-land, 1 land. So it gives you a variety of cards. Now, again, it is an opponent choosing, so, again, depending on the state of the game, depending on what situation you're in, depending on your relationship with your opponents, you might not be getting very good things. That being said, you're still at least hitting a land drop with one of the cards. You're getting certain cards that could just be used. I mean, again, you're getting cards out of your deck. Your deck should have enough synergy that all your cards are in there for a reason. That being said, the high threshold end of this card is, yeah, you're in a situation where we're buddy-buddy right now because that player over there is crazy powerful when you take them out. I'm going to play this card. Please, please, please get me 3 good things. And you even can have input into that. You'd be like, hey, okay, yeah, so we're in a situation right now. They got a really good board state right now. So give me Austere Command, and I'll take out these things that are theirs. And then if you give me a creature like, oh, Everest Rejuvenator too, then I can take out this thing too. You can utilize, again, politics. It is definitely part of the game of Commander. It's a huge part of the game of Commander. Again, the better you are at it, the more effective a card like this can be. This card, again, has I think I said low bar, but it's like more like it's got like a high floor, okay? Because again, it is 3 for 3. Not many cards out there will give you 3 cards for 3 mana. And again, guaranteed a land drop too. That being said, its ceiling is quite high because this can be 2 for 3 pretty good cards out of your deck, essentially, as long as you're working with an opponent who can help you with that. Is this card just for Group Hug? Absolutely not. But is it for like every deck out there? No. I mean, you need a good balance of, I guess not really lands, but sure. Creatures and non-creatures, because if you just all creature deck, it's like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, you get just rampant growth and then your worst creature. It is not for every deck out there. It is a spicy card, though, and it is one that can be very good, again, in the right situation. Speaking of which, Rush of Knowledge, 25 cents right now, Sorcery for 5 mana. Draw cards with the highest converted mana cost among permanents you control. This card, again, has an absurdly high ceiling. For 5 mana, being able to draw 10-plus cards, again, it just really depends on the deck out there, right? Most likely, when it comes to my recommendation for this card, either you have just like an overall high curve in the deck because you're just utilizing some crazy kind of cards in the deck where it's like, oh yeah, I got all big creatures, whatever, I'm ramping a lot, getting big creatures out, cool, I cast this, drawing 8, whatever it is. Or if you have a commander that is a very high converted mana cost commander, especially one that is, protected in some kind of a way, this is a crazy good effect. Again, this is like 5 mana, replace your whole hand kind of a card. So, is it for every deck out there? No. That being said, unlike some other ones, like I think Soul's Majesty is more like target creature's power, that can definitely flop more than this one because this is like equally highest converted mana cost among permanents you control. It doesn't make you target, so you're not like, oh, okay, I cast this, target this, and the opponent's like, I remove that, and you're like, no! I mean, at the very least, again, if you cast this and you had, say, like an 8 mana value thing on the board and someone removed that, you're like, oh, darn, I guess I have to draw, let's see, my other one is a 5, so I'll draw the 5 instead. So it's very unlikely that you're going to whiff on this, unlike some other cards like that. That being said, this has a very, very, very high ceiling for you to utilize. Speaking of that, head games. This card is disgustingly effective. This card is disturbingly good. Sorcery for 5 mana. Target opponent puts cards from their hand on top of their library. Search that player's library for that many cards. The player puts those cards in their hand and shuffles their library. This is ruin someone's game level type card. Again, even if someone is in the best position out of everyone else on the board, they're like, haha, I've got the best board state. I've got a full grip. I got 7 cards in my hand. If they can't counter this, they're done for the most part. They are top decking and hoping that they can hit something. Because again, you're just like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, you've got an amazing hand. Great. All right, let's take that, put that on top. And then all of a sudden, yeah, I'm just going to go get you 7 lands. Yep. I'm just going to make you basically have dead draw 7 times with nothing else. That is what you have. You're going to be top decking for basically the rest of the game unless you've got anything on the board that can help you draw into more cards. You're going to be top decking and hoping you hit something. This can ruin someone's entire game plan, even again if they were in an amazing position to start. So yes, it's a very, very good card in that way. It's also somewhat flexible, I will say, where again, in that scenario where it's like, hey, buddy over there, that player is going to win the game unless we stop them. Do you have a Wrath in your deck? Cool. All right, you got 2 cards in your hand. I'm going to cast Head Games on you. I'm going to go get you 2 cards. One is going to be a Wrath. The other one you can choose whatever as long as it doesn't affect me that much. Cool. So it's flexible in that way where, again, you can kind of politic with a card, but it's also just a destroy someone's hopes and dreams. Basically make them discard their entire hand and they get nothing essentially in return. I mean, yes, you get them cards back, but still, that does not matter most of the time. It's like, no, you get 7 lands. Cool. Congratulations. You'll hit your land drops, and you'll have nothing else to do with that mana because you're just going to keep drawing in potentially cards that are just off the top of your deck that you don't need because I got rid of your great hand. It's a really cool card, really underrated, and yeah, just a very spicy one. Moving on. Now, we talked about earlier with Glory just how effective protection can be. Let's start with an instant with a Chroma's Blessing. An instant for 3 mana. Again, the glory cost, right, essentially. Creatures you control gain protection from the color choice still have turn. We can also cycle away for a single white mana, and that is what makes this card good. Okay, so what this card is again, Good protection for a lot of things, and also potential aggressive play as well. You can utilize protection in a lot of different fashions. Again, if someone's targeting one of your things or more of your things, essentially you're like, no, I don't want you to target them. Cool, pick the color, whatever they're targeting with. If they are going to be destroying the board in a red-based Blasphemous Act board wipe, cool. Again, protect your board, say, it's fine. Or, again, if you're like, I need to swing through, and that player only has green blockers, sweet. I will be able to swing through and make my creatures basically unblockable against them. Or if I need a block, you can utilize that for blocking too. That being said, if you don't need it, and you need to replace with something else, a single white mana to cycle this away, very effective. So again, it's flexible in that, where if you need it, it can be an amazing card. If you don't need it, cycle it away, no big deal at all. Next up. Speaking of drawing cards, though, keep watch. Instant for 2 and a blue. Draw a card for each attacking creature. Now, keep in mind, it doesn't specify, like, creature attacking you or you're attacking creatures. No. This is a flexible card in that does not matter who is attacking or who's being attacked. Does not matter at all. If this player over here is attacking that player over there, you're like, huh, that's 10 creatures attacking. Okay, 3 mana, draw 10 cards, instant speed is absurd, and yeah, that is, I'm not going to say in the lower threshold what can happen, but you can definitely draw more. I've drawn a lot more than that with this. Being able to say, no matter what the situation is, when in a commander game, unless you're playing against every single player that's like Pell Fort decks and no one's attacking at all, you're going to be drawing at least 3 cards with this most likely, if not a lot more. And of course, for decks like my Feldergriff deck that are actively encouraging players to attack and giving players more creatures to attack with, you can draw an absurd amount of cards with this. It's a great card to be like, yeah, whether you're attacking me or someone else, I'm going to gain a lot of value out of it. Or if I have a massive army myself, I'm going to gain a lot of value out of this too. Again, just 3 mana, draw easily 3+ cards is pretty absurd. Next up, I'm going to keep bringing these Transmute ones up because I don't think they see enough love. Shred Memory. Instant for 1 and a black. Remove the 4 target cards from a single grave from the game. Transmute for 1 black. So again, tutor for anything out of your deck that costs 2. Now, I will say that 2 is probably more on the lower end, unless you've got like a combo, like, you know, your dramatic reversal type combos or whatnot, Ice Crown Scepter. Sure, that's kind of more where you're going for. When it comes to kind of less combo-centric decks out there, 2 might be a bit lower. That being said, you can have some very flexible things that you might want to get out of that, like some removal. You can go get, a certain creature that might help you out in a certain situation. It just really depends. That being said, this one is good in that, hey, this is either removal, graveyard removal, which players tend to not utilize enough, I feel like, but here we go. Here's a reason to put this one in there, because it's also a good tutor for depending on the situation. Next up, Perplex. We talked about earlier just how devastating a card like Head Games is. This is quite a fun kind of decision point for your opponent. Perplex, instant for 1 blue and a black. Counter target spell this controller discards their hand, or transmute this away, again for 1 blue and a black. So a tutor for CMC 3 is pretty incredible for the most part, right? You usually get you something very, very, very good for the situation that you're in, or again, a certain combo piece or whatever it's going to be. So yes, another reason to utilize it, but also this is a counter spell that again can just be game ruining for someone if they make the wrong decision with it, and also just a typical counterspell. It's like, hey, that's countered because you're not going to discard 6 cards out of your hand to stop this from happening. Or again, just putting a player in a situation where they're like, I really need to stop that. I guess I'll get rid of my 3 cards. And then they're just top decking and then hoping. So again, these kinds of cards that do have utility, but also are incredible transmute effects, which I will keep pounding the table. Transmute is amazing. Basically an uncounterable tutor, essentially. Make sure you're picking those up. Next up, let's move on to artifacts, starting off with Voyager Staff. Voyager Staff is an artifact that costs 1, pay 2, sacrifice it, exile target creature, turn the exile card to the battlefield under its own control to begin next end step. This is a very flexible card. It's also one that, again, not every single color out there has blink type effects. I mean, typically blink effects are in blue and white. That's basically all the colors that get blink effects. Now there's other like somewhat similar kind of effects, like black has like feign death type effects. The creature dies, comes back. Somewhat similar. That being said, when it comes to just like straight up blink effects, there's not too many that are usable in every single kind of a deck out there, and Voyager Staff is a great one. Again, basically just a sit there, and then whenever I need to, 2 mana, blink something. Incredible effect to just utilize those ETBs, utilize LTB triggers, and then also just good protection with this too. Again, if a wrath is happening, this is like a delayed blink effect. At the beginning of the next end step, if I could talk, is when the creature comes back. So again, someone wraths the board, you're like, okay, well, I want my commander to stick around, so yeah, go ahead, wrath the board, and my commander will come back at the end step and be fine. Or, again, keep in mind, this does not say exile target creature you control. Keep that in mind, too. So when someone is swinging at you with a giant creature, and you're like, I don't really have any defenses for that. Well, let's just say, nope, it's not swinging at me anymore. It will come back to the end step. Thank you. You can also make deals with this too. Again, if an opponent's getting swung at and about to get taken out, you're like, hey, that Blightsteel Colossus is about to hit you. You got no way to stop it. I'll stop it for you, but you got to be my buddy until the very end of the game, okay? Thank you. So yeah, it's a very flexible card in that way. Next up, Slate of Ancestry. My goodness. When it comes to card advantage, it's hard to compete against this card. Artifact for 4, pay 4, tap, discard your hand, draw a card for each creature you control. Players do not like to discard their hand. Many players out there don't like to do that, especially when it comes to a card that is a variable amount of card draw. That being said, if you are in a token-based strategy or any kind of a go-wide strategy, or even just like one that has a decent amount of creatures in the deck, chances are you're drawing like 4+ cards every single time with this. So be okay with discarding your hand, getting rid of it, and being like, yeah, you know what, I'll replace it with a lot of things. So yeah, you can very easily set yourself up, again, like right before your turn. Again, right before your turn happens, you're like, okay, none of these cards that I have are really going to be all that impactful. I've got some extra mana lying around. I'll activate this. I'll discard my hand. I'll draw 5 cards, whatever it is. Next turn, I'm in a much better spot, much better setup again with this kind of a repeatable, amazing effect to dig down deeper in your deck. And of course, for decks that actually want to get things in their graveyard or want to discard cards and get value out of that, it's even better. So make sure you're keeping that in mind. Next up, very specific. Again, this one is actually very specific on what kinds of decks want it. If you don't have multicolored creatures, you don't want this card. That being said, many decks out there do have multicolored creatures. This is an amazing card for those decks. Artifact for 5 mana. Pay 2, tap. You may put a multicolored creature card from your hand on the battlefield. Now, will you get like your value out of it right away? Unless you've got like a really large, multicolored creature, then no. That being said, being able to cheat things into play like Aether Vial style, essentially, being able to cheat creatures into play from your hand directly on the battlefield, that's huge. It gets around countering. It gets around, well, your opponent's knowing that what you're doing, essentially, because it's going to be not on your turn when you're doing that most of the time, being like, oh, okay, cool, yeah. Right before my turn starts, let's flash in this giant creature. Awesome! Your opponent's like, oh my gosh, they're in such a good position now, and I'm in trouble. Or it makes your opponents have a really difficult time attacking into you because they're like, yeah, that player's got 2 mana open. They've got 4 cards in hand. I'm going to swing with this big creature, but what are the chances that they throw a giant dragon down in my path? Yeah, it can be a great way to essentially deter attacks. It can be a great way to cheat on mana cost. And again, the longer the game goes on with this kind of a card, the more value you're getting out of it, the more money you are saving over time with your creatures. And again, gets around protection, gets around counter spells as well. Next up, Orochi Hatchery. This is one that I think is just so spicy. Artifact for XX, enters the battlefield with X counters on it. Pay 5, tap, put a 1/1 snake creature token on the battlefield for a charge counter on it. This is one that got better and better and better throughout the years, especially again when proliferate effects become more common. We got a lot of great proliferate effects. Some that are just kind of like thrown onto something, not thrown to them, but like there's some really good ones. Like that one Canker Bloom or whatever that destroys artifact or enchantment. Already good without that, 3/2. And it's like, no, you can also proliferate if you would rather do it instead. So it's like, oh yeah, cool. So being able to put this into like a big mana type deck or one that just really focuses heavily on charge counters and proliferating can be great. Again, a great finisher for you. One that is a great repeatable way to just say, let's dump a ton of snakes into play and see what happens. And again, like I just said with our, what did I say? Dragon Arch is the card's name. If I could remember, being able to just say, okay, yeah, come on, swing at me. Go ahead. I'll just pay 5 mana. I'll make a bunch of blockers. What are you going to do about that? So yeah, being able to just utilize this in a lot of different effective ways is really good. Next up, Tangle Route. This is a card again. When it comes to cards that can benefit your opponents at all, some players just like, nope, not at all. Never going to use it ever, 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 ever. Like Oblation's an amazing card. Players like, nope, don't want to benefit my opponents. Calm down, okay? Tangle Route, great card. Artifact for 3. Whenever a player casts a creature spell, the player adds green to the mana pool. Yes, your opponents will get value out of this. Unless they're playing a completely non-creature spell deck with no creatures in the entire deck, they will get value out of this. That being said, with the right strategy, you will get so much more value out of it. It will be absurd. Again, if you're playing it in like an all creature-based strategy, basically, cool. Get this in play. As every single time you cast a creature spell, you're getting extra mana back. If you're playing with a bounce type strategy where you're getting creatures back in your hand, this can be a crazy good combo piece for you. Kind of like a Bergie-esque style card, and obviously pairs really well with that, where it's like, oh, I cast a spell, I get extra mana, I get extra free things. Being able to get an absurd amount of value out of this is good, obviously. I mean, if you're playing like an artifact creature-based strategy, and you're like, hey, all my creatures are low to the ground, cool. Being able to get them into play, I say low to the ground artifact-based, but it's like, when you have like those oh gosh, like Ethereum Sculptor type effects where it's like reducing the cost of your artifacts and playing them for cheaper, or other kinds of effects like Gore Claw that reduce the cost. Being able to play creatures for like almost nothing or even gaining mana off of creatures is absurd with a card like this. So again, just because a card benefits your opponents or has a potential to, does not mean it's a bad card. Again, especially if you can take much more value out of it. Like a Fecundity is so good for you, it's okay to utilize in a deck where you know you're going to have more synergy than your opponents with it. Next up, Gemstone Array. Oh, I love this card. Artifact for 4, pay 2, put a charge counter on it, remove a charge counter from it, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. This is a amazing mana storage system for you. This is, hey, do you have extra mana lying around at any point? Awesome. Utilize it, get that mana onto this essentially in the form of charge counters. It's like a 2-for-1, sure, but you can utilize that mana in any way. Again, unlike other ones where it's like that mana becomes colorless, essentially, like with, Horizon Stone, is that the one? No, this is like the exact opposite. This is like you can put colors into it, and then mana of any color comes out of it, essentially, whenever you need that. And also, again, like I mentioned earlier, a card that got even better over the years with proliferate effects becoming more apparent, essentially, becoming more used. Now we have more proliferate cards. Utilize those for something like this to get more counters on it for free, essentially, and then utilize that mana in a very effective way. So an amazing mana storage system. Next up, this card might upset some players out there, so be careful. I mean, I'm not going to say it's going to get you targeted in a game necessarily, but it very well might, depending on how you go about it. Lantern of Insight. Artifact for 1, each player plays the top card of the library revealed. Tap, sacrifice, target player shelves their library. Typically, you're not going to be sacrificing this unless you're like, that's like a game-ending card right there, and I have nothing else to do about it, so before you can draw it, I'm going to make you shuffle your library. Being able to see what every single player is going to be drawing is absurd. And keep in mind, too, Rose Layers out there, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on this, but like, hey, if someone casts like, I draw 7 cards, everyone gets to see those 7 cards that they're going to be drawing, because technically every single one of those cards would have gone on top of their library at some point, so they could have seen those cards. Essentially, there's no secrets, except for whatever cards were already in your hand before I played this. There's no secrets. Everyone knows what everyone else is going to have, which means that, again, threat assessment can be more easily identifiable. Essentially, you can be like, yeah, that player is the threat because we know they just drew this, this, and this, and they're about to draw this. Let's make sure we shut them down for that. So any kind of a control-based strategy can really utilize this. Obviously, a mill strategy can utilize this to an absurd degree, to an insane degree. I mean, this was like a modern deck, right? Lantern control, essentially. But yeah, being able to do this, seeing, hey, I know what everyone's going to be drawing. I've got this card, like Ghoul Caller's Bell. They can just mill everyone 1. Let's make sure that player doesn't get that card. So I'm going to mill it, and then they're not going to draw into it. So yeah, being able to kind of like fate seal people, you can do that too. It's a crazy good card. Now, again, is it for every deck? No, but a control-based strategy, I think, can really utilize it again, especially a mill-based strategy with some controlling aspects to it. And be careful with this kind of a strategy, though, because some play groups aren't okay with that, like shutting people out of the game, essentially, by being like, yeah, I'm not going to let you draw that. Yeah, I'm not going to let you draw that. Yeah, I'm not going to let you draw that. And also, again, kind of like telepathy, players can just target you depending on how you propose that this goes, and being like, hey, everyone, I'm trying to help you all out because that player's a problem. So let's see what they're going to be drawing. Instead of it being like, everyone's mad at that player because they're showing everyone what they're drawing, and we don't like that. Kind of like telepathy. So yeah, be careful, but a very good card. But now on to enchantments, and a really big one that kind of saw a different version of it with, I think it was Virtue of whatever one of those virtues was in black. Across Debtor's Knell, an enchantment for 4 in Orzhov colors for 3. At the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard on the battlefield under control. Any graveyard, repeatable value. You're playing Commander, 4-player game. Chances are there's going to be at least one very good creature in a graveyard every single time. The trip comes around the table, and it's your turn to pick and be like, oh, that creature got dealt with last turn. Great, give me it. See, if you got any kind of removal in the deck, which you should have removal. Again, a Wrath happens, you're like, oh, great, amazing creature. I got like 5 extra turns of like great choices with this card. Or if you've got mill strategy as well, or discard strategy, whatever it is, this is a card that can just be a game ender for you. It's a lot of value to be had over time. Speaking of value, though, Golgari Germination. This is one of those I do think gets underrated. There's other ones like, like that zombie one that's at 5 mana that's like, people are like, yeah, I love it. It's because it's zombies and players love zombies, but like, when it comes to like aristocrat style strategies, you just want a creature token. It doesn't really matter what it is because you're probably going to sacrifice it anyways. Enchantment for 1 black green Golgari Germination. Whenever a non-token creature control dies, put a 1/1 green sapling creature token on the battlefield. I couldn't care less if it made a 0/1 Kobold, I don't know. It doesn't matter what it is making. All that matters is, hey, if a non-token creature control dies, you replace it. So again, Aristocrat-style strategies rejoice because this is an amazing token creator for you. Sacrifice creature. Cool, I get to replace it. Yay! Sacrifice that too. Value. Zulpar Cutthroat. Draining people. Do everything you want to do. Next up. Kind of a joke, but kind of not. Pation Accord. Famously, not really that famously, but would have been really good with shield counters. Anyways, enchantment for 5 mana and Azorius. Whenever a creature the opponent controls becomes tapped, put a shield counter, Wizards, on Pation Accord. They changed that to Palliation counter. Come on, Wizards. No fun at all. This card would not be broken or anything like that if it was shield counters.
We don't want this card to be better, and we made a mistake by giving it the name Shield Counters years ago, and we want to use that now.
Nah. No fun, Wizards. It would have been fine. Remove a shield counter from it for the next 1 damage to be dealt to you this turn. Again, Palliation counter, whatever it is. Essentially, this is a card that's like, you build up just a glut of counters on this, and then you utilize it in a defensive manner. So, this is what I love my Feldergriff deck. It is a card that is definitely not for every kind of deck out there. That being said, again, like I've talked about, once you get 1 counter on this, like, hey, you got proliferate effects, you can utilize those. Those are more apparent these days. You also just, again, if players are attacking each other, you still get value out of that. If players are tapping their creatures for mana, again, like all those mana dorks out there, you're getting value out of that. Any kind of an activated tap ability, like a Garth ability, yeah, you're getting value out of that too. Being able to store up these counters and be able to say, do you really want to attack me? Because, like, this is kind of like, at the very least, again, for each creature, I'm reducing it by 1 damage for every single one creature. So if you're going against, like, a token army, it's all 1/1s, there's no reason for you to attack me. But also, again, if you're attacking someone else, then I get extra counters on this to save me from other things too. It's a very cool defensive card in that way. And again, it's preventing next 1 damage to be dealt to you this turn from anything. It can be also like burn effects it can prevent from as well, or any kind of pinging effects too. So make sure you're keeping that in mind. But it's a very, very, very cool card. Not for every deck out there, but a very spicy one that I think is pretty underrated. Next up, Perilous Forays. My goodness. Enchantment for 5 mana. Pay 1, sacrifice a creature to life for a land card with a base land type on the battlefield. Tap, then shuffle. Crazy effective. Oh my goodness. Again, any kind of a deck that's like, yeah, I don't mind sacrificing creatures. I've got, enough tokens in play, or actually care about sacrificing creatures like an aristocrat style strategy. This is like, hey, do you want to pay 1 mana to like rampant growth again? Yeah. Yes, you do. All of a sudden, you just get like every single land out of your deck into play with a crazy, amazing sacrifice outlet with this. It's not free, and usually the best sacrifice outlets are free, but this is one where it's like, yeah, you pay mana to get more long-term mana. What's not to love about that? Speaking of what's not to love, Phyrexian Tyranny. Oh my gosh, gross. Enchantment for 3 mana in Grixis. Whenever a player draws a card, the player loses 2 life for this. They pay 2. Ow. I mean, not for every deck out there, obviously, but yeah, if you got a wheel-based strategy and you're like, yeah, let's just drain everyone really, really quickly. It's getting kind of like a not reverse Smothering Tithe type effect, but it's like instead of me getting a benefit out of you drawing a card, it's you getting punished. Now you get punished as well. Obviously, you got ways you can take advantage of this more than opponents too, though. So yeah, just make sure keeping that in mind. Another one that I just want to point out, this one's interesting. It's definitely not for every kind of deck out there. Web of Inertia. Enchantment for 3 mana in blue. Give each opponent's combat phase player may remove a card in their graveyard from the game. If they don't, creatures they control can't attack you this turn. Oh, okay. So this is a very, very specific, like ghostly prison type effect, but it can be even better. If you've got ways to get rid of graveyards or control graveyards or just prevent graveyards from ever happening, like Rest in Peace, cool. You're untouchable in combat. That is just a really spicy effect to say, yeah, you can't do it. And also, there's certain decks out there that actually care about their graveyards. Again, like reanimation-style decks. Some self-mill decks that care about certain cards in their graveyard. Or, like, I guess, threshold decks, if those are really a thing. But being able to get rid of specific cards in graveyards, again, is good. But also, if you have those cards that can ensure that there either isn't a graveyard, like a Bajuka Bog, or, like, a Recipe that makes it so there's no graveyard ever, this can just protect you, like, perpetually in combat. It's a pretty spicy card. Speaking of spice, though, Wild Pair. This one, I think, again, is underrated. And again, for like creature-based strategies out there, there's some really cool things that you can do with it. Enchantment for 6 mana. Whenever a creature's battlefield, if you cast them in your hand, you may search your life for a creature card, the same total power and toughness. Put it onto the battlefield. If you do, shuffle your library. Again, same total power and toughness. Add those up. So it's not like has to have the exact same power, has to have the exact same toughness. No, it's adding those 2 up. So if you got a lot of overlap with that, which if you just look through like any kind of a deck out there, you're probably like, yeah, okay, there's a lot at 4, there's a lot at 6, a lot at 5. Yeah, you can usually find that if you're playing a creature, you will be able to find another creature to now get to play for free. Just by getting this into play for 6 mana, you give yourself basically double creatures and sometimes an even better creature than the one that you're playing. Or again, it can tutor for that like specific effect that you need. Like, oh, okay, I just play this like creature in play. It's a 2/2. And, oh, I need to destroy that over there. Oh, let me go get my acidic slime or whatever. Whatever it is, again, essentially you can get kind of like tutor up. It's like a toolbox kind of card for you in a very weird way. Yeah, it's pretty spicy, pretty good. Moving on, Dawn of the Dead. Enchantment for 5 mana. Beginning of upkeep, lose 1 life. Oh no, 1 life in Commander. No big deal at all. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to play. That creature gains haste on turn. Remove that from the game at the end of turn. So it's kind of like Debtor's Knell in a way, but like only for your graveyard. It does give them haste. It gets rid of them permanently. Yeah, there's a slight downside with the loss of 1 life, but yeah, being able to swing at those creatures right away and reanimate them out of your graveyard is massive. But again, for an achievement that only costs 5, that's pretty undercosted for just giving you that kind of value again and again and again. Also, keep in mind, again, remove from the game and a turn, exile at the end of the turn. If you have any kind of a sacrifice outlet, you can get that back in your graveyard and you can utilize it again and again and again, which works, of course, incredibly with LTBs and ETBs, attack triggers, whatever it is. You got a lot of cool things you can do with that. Next up, speaking of cool, Psychic Possession. Again, these kind of cards that are like, it could benefit an opponent, kind of. I mean, this one doesn't really benefit an opponent. It's just like you're depending on an opponent. That can be really good. Psychic Possession, Aura for 4 mana, enchant opponent, skip your draw step, whatever, enchant opponent draws a card, you may draw a card. Okay, so again, you're like, oh, I don't want to depend on an opponent for drawing. Darn, I don't want to do it, and I have to give up my draw? Darn. Okay, here's just a small scenario. If an opponent plays a Rhystic Study, now you have a Rhystic Study. You put that on that opponent, and you're like, cool, I get to draw with you. Great. Every single time they're drawing, you are drawing. There's a slight downside to this card, but again, it's a massive upside. The ceiling on this card is absurd. Again, they're doing all the work for you. They're like, okay, I cast my Pull for Tomorrow for 10 mana. And you're like, oh, thank you. I will also draw that many cards without the downside of having to discard a card as well. If someone wheels, again, when an opponent draws a card, you draw a card. It doesn't say when an opponent discards a card, you discard one. So if they wheel and they say, okay, I discard, my hand, I draw 7. You're just like, oh, cool. I just get to draw 7 because I get the additional value out of that. So again, keep in mind, this can turn any kind of a downside draw spell to just an upside draw spell for you. Can also like kind of hamper that opponent because they're like, I don't want to cast this and get ahead because I put that other player even farther ahead. So yeah, this allows you to, again, yes, you're dependent on an opponent playing a deck that draws a decent amount of cards potentially, but like chances are you're playing against 3 opponents. One of them is going to have a deck that's like, yeah, I like to draw cards. Cool, good for you. Being able to just put this on an opponent that has, again, a repeatable draw effect or just massive draw spells, you can get a lot of value out of. Finally, Aurification. Enchantment for 4 mana. Whenever a creature deals damage, you put a gold counter on it. Each creature with a gold counter on is a wall to other types. Walls can't attack. Really, I mean, I guess it's like wall with defender is probably how it's worded these days. Whenever Aurification leaves play, remove all gold counters from all creatures. So this is kind of like a great attack deterrent. Again, like, it works in different ways than our other ones we've talked about so far, right? Ghostly Prison would be like, hey, yeah, don't attack me unless you pay. This one's like, don't attack me or you can never attack me again with that creature until you deal with this. So essentially, this is a way to say, hey, yeah, just don't come at me. It's a good card to be like, you know what, if I can keep this in play, or if I just need like a couple of turns off of players coming at me, it's a good way to say, unless you're going to be able to finish me off, you might not want to swing at me because your creatures are going to become not useless, but not nearly as useful with a card like this. But now as this episode is coming to a close, it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know your thoughts are on these cards. If you're interested in these cards, make sure you check out that card list link in the description below. Excited to hear from you again. These are cards that I remember from my childhood, and just taking a trip down memory lane has been a lot of fun with this kind of an episode. Just going back to like, okay, like during the time when I used to play when I was a kid, what's still good now? What's being underrated right now? What should be played right now? So yeah, transmute everyone. Make sure you're transmuting. But yes, if you have any questions, comments, concerns on the cards I brought up and be like, hey, that's a weird card, that's okay. You can comment as well. There's definitely going to be things we'll disagree on. But I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. But yeah, also some picks that I probably missed from this era as well. So yeah, let me know in the comments below. Make sure you check out the card list link in the description below. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.